All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. And today I'm talking again with Zach, one of the coaches on the team here at Stronger You. We're going to be going into the idea of competing at higher level meets, things like nationals, um, and other pro level meets and pro level meets, as well as comparing that against more local meets, rookie meets, scrimmage meets, depends what you want to call it. But starting out, those first couple meets you do, and looking at some of the similarities as well as some of the key differences that are present, both positive and negative between the two. So, Zach, how's it going, man? You just competed. You had your first pro meet at the Arnold, right?
Yeah, it was, definitely an experience, I guess. The Arnold specifically, the expo and all was really cool to be at, and most of the people there, were much physically smaller than you expected. You had, IFBB pros next to anorexic 15-year-olds, which is really funny, but, really cool, just, first high-level meet to go to because it wasn't just, nowhere, insert city, comma, state. There was something else going on there to kind of mentally give you that reprieve from "Oh, I'm competing in 2 days, gotta get locked in." So, yeah, really cool to do that, really cool for that to be the first high level meet, and had a really fun time with it.
Yeah, having now coached and competed at higher level meets, I think back to the first really big meet I did when I did Worlds in AAU, which is admittedly a fairly small federation in the grand scheme of things. And that was 2014. And I don't think I've ever seen a meet that was organized like a local level meet at such a high level. We'll say it's so wild. And then you compare that against what does nationals look like, last year or this year, even Westerns for regionals for us. It's such a dramatically different sport over the last decade, just how much things have changed. What were, I guess, maybe the easier place to start, comparing it against some of the open level meets. What are some of the things you found that are the same, that match up where it's actually not as different as someone would think?
Yeah, so as far as, similarities, right, you've always got some flights, you're just gonna, fly through it. I was almost expecting, squat and deadlift. You've got some people that are, squatting mid 600s and then, low 700s, likewise with deadlift. It's kind of still paced similarly. Bench especially was very fast, and I think it's because number one, a lot of people were just clustered in the same relative area, but you also just had a really good spotting and loading crew. Like when I spot and load at local meets, I make sure that we're on the second that the person is away from the bar, we're stripping it, we're loading, and they definitely had that same kind of approach here. So we would hit your bench, give them your attempt, and then you'd basically stand on the side of the platform because in 6 or 7 minutes, it's go time again. And I've always found that at local level meets here in New Jersey, and it was really fun to see that at that higher level meet as well.
Yeah, the spotting, loading rhythm or whatever the volunteer curriculum, however they're training these days, it's so much more streamlined. It used to be I've got a sort of template timer that I'll run at meets like that. I'm like, hey, you got 8 people in your flight. That means we're probably, you know, 8 to 9 minutes between squats. We're probably 12 minutes between bench attempts, all that.
Yeah.
And the bench and then deadlifts are always a little faster because, there's no rack height adjustment and all that. And relative to each other, bench is always the slowest of the three, but um, it's closed up a lot. I've noticed they're loading plates faster, they're getting those racks set up faster, and whether it's the number of volunteers or just having really streamlined processes now, and having pins that have
Yeah.
oversized bores so they don't go through the rack,
Yeah.
that does help. But yeah, it's been so much more streamlined where I've had actually adjust those rough mental calculations that I'll run in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah. It's like a NASCAR pit crew. like, and obviously you could go to a local level meet where it's all volunteers and it's going to be a little bit slower anyways. But I feel like at least at this point in time for the sport, if you're volunteering to handle or to spot and load at a local level meet, there's at least a good number of people who have already done it who are there, and it's gonna be pretty quick and moving. And yeah, like you said, it's just on the money.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that's where a lot of handlers can get caught out. Um, and first time lifters as well at those smaller meets where they're like, oh yeah, no, my boyfriend's handling me, or my lifting partner or whatever, right? The exaggeration is always, your spouse, your partner, your whatever, and they don't even know what your max bench is.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're they're handling you.
They've never seen a calibrated plate before. They're like, oh, I like the green one. It's like, okay, we're going by reds.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
we're going by exactly. Um, and that's I find, at least in my experience, more reliably. at the higher level meets, the higher you go, up to about nationals. I don't think it would really change past that. It's a bit more professional in the back room, not in a like stiff sense, but just like people kind of know what's going on. You have less of these like accidental agents of chaos who like don't know that a red isn't 45 pounds. Um, yeah, you've had some experience as well at nationals where, or bigger meets as well, where that hasn't been the case, right?
Yeah, I've been to like national level meets handling my lifters before where number one, like the person handling didn't know what the calibrated plates were and was basically having people take more than their opening attempt in the back room, or even having them take their openers, just not knowing what the loading was, or not knowing like how the collars work. Now there was one lifter who I was like waiting to warm up on bench. They were about to take 300 kilos as their last squat warm up, and they got it off the rack. First step, second step, they go to settle, and whoever had put that collar on just didn't put it on correctly right off, and all the weight flew, and then it went like that, and everyone was like freaking out. And it was funny. Like this dude squatted like 800 pounds that day. He was completely unfazed. He was laughing. He was cool about it. He was like, "Oh no, it's fine. Like it just happens. Whatever." They reloaded it. He took it again. I know that like personally, I would probably have fully crashed out. And maybe that's because it was my first time at like a high level meet like that. If my last squat warm up like dumped like that because someone just didn't know how the collar worked. But a lot of those dudes were just super level headed, super just like flat the whole time. And that was really elucidating for it.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's an extension of just having competed enough to be at the national level? Or do you feel like that's like almost desensitizing to it? Or more so like, hey, this is a conscious skill they've put a lot of effort into, like, no, I'm going to really not allow myself to spike in spite of wanting to like go make it look like an Instagram montage of hardcore training footage with like hypersaturated video lenses and stuff.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, right? Because I do feel like when I stepped out there, and I was in a flight with George Nima, who is a fantastic 90 kilo lifter. He totals like mid 800s. Kevin Sadukin, which was last year's USAPL national champ and IDFPA world champ. Dan Howell, who like 2 years ago was the national. Like I was with all those guys, and I went out for my opening squat, and I said to Kevin in the back, and I'm like, dude, like this is really cool. Like I've never seen this many lights and this many people. There's like high school bleachers, like 100 something people in the crowd watching you lift. And I was definitely overstimulated by it. He's like, "Oh, yeah, like, you'll just get used to it. Like, by the time we get to bench, like, it'll kind of even out." Even the display, like, when you step out there that's in your face, like, there's some different thing that it definitely got me at first. And a lot of these guys were so used to it where they were like, "Oh, like, it's just lights. It's just a crowd. Like, normally it's foldable chairs. It's just bleachers today." Basically, is what one of the guys said to me. And that was helpful. But a lot of them did seem like they were just super composed because they wanted to be. I'm sure that's the mental side of like, I trust that I've done everything in the prep that I can to be as ready for this moment as possible. But you could tell, like, as we got closer to last deadlifts, that's when they were starting to like open the bottle a little bit, get a little amped up, get a little psyched. Versus one of the guys in my flight who numerically just like the total wasn't there. Like he was probably the cutoff was 450 dots. He was like 450 or 451. Like
Sure.
numerically was not in the same league as those top level guys. He was screaming his head off in his opening squat and like getting hopped up on ammonia and stuff. And he just fell off throughout the day. And I think that he didn't have that practice being at that high level meet, and mentally was kind of buying into the hype of like, I need to get that like Instagram reel kind of like energy versus the guys who were competing for the top 5 spots. They were, you know, dead pulse all day. They were just like, oh,
Yeah.
third squat was cool. I got it.
Very IPF legal of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find like some of it is you can almost get in your own way in that like there's a saying with like stress management, right? Like the most stressful thing you've ever experienced is the most stressful thing you've ever experienced, right? And for some people, they might look at what somebody else is experiencing and be like, this is small potatoes, like
Yeah.
suck it up. And then you look at what other people consider like low stress and you're like, I would die.
Yeah.
Like best of luck. And I feel like that's very much the same thing with competing in powerlifting. I have a lifter named JR. So he hit his first provincial qualifying total. So state level, if you're outside of Canada. And we've been working for a while on getting to his provincial qualifying total where he could do provincials this year if he wanted to now. And we were talking about it after. He's like, hey, so like, do you want to do provincials this year? Right? Like, you got some other things, dates, and all this for bigger meetings next year get kind of messy. He's like, well, like, I'm really happy I have it, but like, I want to go and build. And like, basically, the conversation started to revolve around like a lot of these expectations he'd set in place for like going and competing at what is officially a qualified meet. When prior to that, he'd been in just open meets because he didn't have a high enough qualifying total. Right. And I feel like regardless, like basically taking that next step up, because ultimately you're only going to ever be able to take one step up in competition at a time.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of imposed expectations you can impose on yourself.
Yeah.
And then you'll almost get in your own head and become your worst enemy as opposed to forgetting and that's a lot of that is just from forgetting. It's just the powerless meet at the end of the day. You're just dealing with higher floor of who's able to show up. But like the fundamentals are all the same. If anything, I would argue the judging is more consistent, which to
Yeah.
me is less stressful because you're going to have, especially as you get into nationals, you can't have like a level one referee doing nationals. They have to be a national level referee. So like your standards, all that stuff becomes more predictable. There's less variance. The people there generally know what's going on more, and like a lot of the pressure you're going to see is just from yourself in expectations because it's this bigger thing as opposed to it being any different than any of the other meets that you've ever done.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, and I feel like if I had done nationals last year instead of like taking the year off to like go up a weight class, I probably would have came in with more of that like level-headed, like it's all like whatever I'm imposing on myself kind of mindset versus because I took the year off, kind of like what your client is suggesting. Like I built things up. I felt super good about training. I felt super hype. I'm like, I need to perform at a very high level and kind of like, creating that expectation that maybe you can hold up to, maybe you can't. But to your point with the reffing and the judging being more predictable, I was genuinely shocked at how few red lights were handed out, And the reality is the lifters that were there were supposed to be there and they were lifting to those standards. Like I got red lighted on my second and third squat on my left hip, which I know like my left hip just doesn't go as low as my right hip. I've known that for training. I figured as much, like I would get a red light for that. It happened. Likewise, like my right butt cheek came up a little bit on my third bench. I got a red light for that. But it was things that like even as the lifter, having that subjective, like, oh, I hit the lift, like just give me the white. I got the red for it.
yeah,
And I'm like, I deserve that red, but the lift still passed because the other officials weren't like looking for some nonsense. You know what I mean? Like it was very fair. It was very consistent versus I go to a local level meet and having talked to a couple of friends who are local level officials, there are times when they're just throwing out reds.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you'll see people like calling depth on your left hip from the right. And here, I don't want to go and diss a volunteer position. Like these are people taking their time to learn to be good referees. And
Yep.
there's a human component to this as well. Right. But at the same time, from a coaching standpoint, like I would be remiss to say that I've never tried to game that either at open meets and like local meets. Like if I know it's a bunch of local refs, I'll be like, look, if you screw up your first, you're on their radar and you're going to get some really rough calls on seconds and thirds.
Yeah.
So we're going to go have you like 3 count pause your opener and drop it by a couple percent so that you can stomp it. And then they like don't look at you too hard after that. Whereas if you're right on the line of like squat depth or like how floaty your butt is on your bench or how clear the lockout is on your deadlift or if there's any downward movement or whatever on the opener, it's this little death sentence you're signing for yourself for seconds and thirds. Whereas I would argue that at the higher level meets, like higher level referees, my observation has been that they're able to create a bit more separation and they're going to look at the attempt in front of them instead of being like, oh, well, this lifter does this. Let's watch for X, Y, and Z. And like you almost get held to a different level of detail in a sense or a bias, which is inherent with humans, but it's present across lifters instead of across a rule set.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I've even said to my own lifters, like in local meets versus national. I'm like, if you make your first attempt super convincing, you're fine. They're not going to watch you. But if you miss anything, they will be on you for it. And I think this is unique because New Jersey is like pretty notorious for having fairly strict judging standards. I've always kind of felt like, they always look at the attempt as a separate, even though I know these officials a lot of the times personally and they know me as a lifter. They're not looking at my lifting on the day. They're looking at the individual lifts as they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, I would say, fair.
Yeah. It's how it should
Yeah.
be, you know, like,
Yeah, like that's what, yeah, like we shouldn't be like going back to the archives, but like relative to your other squat, this was higher, even though it was to death. Like, no, that's not how judging works. Like, look at the thing in front of you that happened in the last 60 seconds or less.
yeah.
And it's hard. Like judging is hard. Do not get me wrong. And yeah, like being aware of those biases, like there's so much that goes into it. But the flip side is it's also a reality that biases exist and like game that at the open meets and the ability to game that goes away as it gets to the higher level referees. I don't want to say higher standard, but like higher level referees and higher levels of qualification.
Yeah, and that's important for, like, lifters who wanna get better over time to understand. It's like, if you're gonna complain about the officiating at a local level meet and you're like, "They were watching me, blah, blah." The reality is, if there's something that could work against you, you could just as easily take advantage of it, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, like, 3 counting your opener bench or, like, taking a slightly lighter squat that you can just, like, abysmally dunk, knowing that, like, hey, a couple people got called on, depth on the first session, like, making sure that, like, if you know what the issue is gonna be, you can play it much more easily at the local level than you can at the national level.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a certain psychological element with those higher level lifters who are consistently successful. Like I think with, so here, like Emily is my favorite example for like, she's a little bit of a machine sometimes with coaching where I can be like, here's your input. I need you to do the input. She'll be like, got it. And like, it's not a, whatever, right? Where if you start with somebody who maybe they've been self-coaching for a long time, for example, right? I'm not going to name names because this is a little bit of a dick. And like you look at some of the notes that you'll see on the program. You do a 3 count bench with them, for example, and it's a set of 4, right? And they'd be like, pause was a little quick on rep 3 and rep 4 is their note, but RPE 8 or RPE 9, whatever, right? Or you watch them get through their set and they like are doing tempo squats and the tempo changes as the set goes on. And like they start to kind of change the standard they operate at based on a whole bunch of other things, as opposed to like, the standard I lift to is constant. This being with higher level lifter, somebody like Emily, I say pause it, don't give me a touch and go. Pause it. And like, I know for sure, like 100% success rate, she's going to pause it. And if she comes up, she comes up, but the pause will be there. And I'm never getting memos from her being like, oh, well, like I kind of, skipped the pause a little, but like, let's count the number. And when you have that sort of a mentality going into it of like, this is the standard I'm lifting at, and I'm going to find loads that allow me to do that and techniques that allow me to do that. If assuming technique isn't one of you get the idea.
Yeah.
When you have that in mind, that's where you can start to, identify, okay, what are my constants and what are my variables? And creating that mental system lets you stay a bit more level. And again, you look at the people who are alternating between 3 for 9 and 7 for 9 meets. And then the people who are doing, 7 to 9 for 9 or 9 for 9, mentally, it's a very different approach to lifting.
Yeah, yeah, I'd argue that, like, even the people that are going from 3 to 9 to 9 to 9, the ones that are not hitting lifts are probably thinking a lot more, you know? It was very clear, like, watching some of the other dudes in my flight and watching some of the other flights, they were not like, it was like you would watch how they were executing in the warm-up area, and then you watch on the platform, exact same from, like, 2 plates up to, like, 5 plates plus. There was one guy who I knew who, like, I've trained with in the past, like, locally, who was competing there as well as an 82. And I remember watching his deadlift 8, 9 months ago. And the way he was approaching the bar, the way he was setting up, the way he was setting his grip, blah, blah, blah. And then what he was doing on the platform on that day, the exact same, and that's part of it is practice and skill practice and, improving technique, blah, blah, blah. But the other half of it is he was not looking for any shortcuts with it. He wasn't like, oh, I'm going to like add 5 pounds to the bar. I'm going to kind of hit you today and blah, blah, blah. And like essentially trying to like force progress. He hit like a massive PR total, hit a massive deadlift PR. And it was just boiled down to like this was a thing he'd practiced consistently and he stuck to the game plan. He didn't overshoot because he was there with his buddy and he's like, oh, I'm gonna take my week 4 number on a week 2. Like,
Yeah. I feel like there's another observation I've noticed, and this is again more on the like self-coach lifter having a revelation kind of thing of that you'll get a lot of guys who are in that. late intermediate, they're closing in on 400 ish, right? And they still look at training as like the number you can load to the bar, the more you do, the more you progress, right? And like lifting is a stimulus, it's an input, but there's a cost.
Yeah.
But the flip side to that equation is that what you're able to lift on the day for your top set expresses how adapted you are to the previous stresses. And if you can look at it that way, conceptualizing training as like an ability to hold momentum and then periodically like check in on where that adaptation is really to me the difference in somebody who's going to get stuck at that late intermediate phase and not, right? And that's where it's like, okay, well, when you start changing the standard you're lifting to, are you even assessing how recovered and adapted you are to the process? Because like you were doing squats to depth last week and now you're falling forward 3 inches and the bar is at the same depth, but your hips are 3 inches higher. Like, what are you assessing right now? The fact that you can't squat properly? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, and this is something I think I said to one of my lifters who was getting ready for their first meet. I think they're competing this weekend. They sent me the week 1 videos, and it was like 15 pounds more than what I prescribed. It was all over the place, and I'm like, "Dude, you can put 600 pounds on your back, but if you can't squat it to depth, it's no one's gonna give you a medal for walking it out, right?" Like, your ability to execute matters so much more. And to your point about like having those periodic check-ins versus like putting more weight on the bar just to see what's there on the day. It's a conversation I had with Sean very recently about my deadlift. I'm like, what we were doing a couple months ago is we were pushing the secondary day super hard and it was tanking my primary day. We would pull it off and the primary day would show up because now the fatigue is out. uh, this block leading into the competition, we were much more controlled with the secondary day, looking for more of a skill practice thing, and we pulled it off. We didn't get that same boost on the primary day, so I went 2 for 3 on my deadlift. Whatever, doesn't count. It's deadlift. I don't care, right? But going into this block, I'm like, dude, I'm just going to pace the secondary day the way that we have. I need to be more reserved on the primary day so we get that same level of boost when we pull it off. And we just got to kind of figure out where that sweet spot is rather than putting weight on the bar because I know I can do this for a triple. It's like it makes every cell in my body scream when I've got less than 4 plates on the bar for a deadlift, but it's ultimately like what I need as a lifter at that time. And that's what's going to make me improve over time as opposed to staying in this same, high 500, low 600 range that I've been stuck in for a year and a half.
yeah, it's it like mentally is so hard to contend with that, especially like I think most of us come into lifting because like, yeah, it's like this hard thing. It's grindy, like RPE 8, RPE 9, the odd 10, right? And I've got one lifter who's just gone through every now and then I'll do like a comparison between different strategies and level the playing field. And they'll look at um, gain over block, right? And so average for this one lifter I've been working with, she's been seeing 4 to sometimes touching 5%, like 4.4 to 4.9 is kind of the typical range of like percentage gain block over block, right? And we tried something out and we said, hey, like we've been doing this for a long time. We've seen consistently like this is our ROI with this sort of style of like top set at a 9 and like some back downs at an 8, for simple explanation, like this sort of input stimulus, right? And I said, okay, what I want to try is let's go with something where you still get a top set to handle something heavy, but it's not really the focus. Let's accumulate more of our focus into like submaximal stuff, like bigger low drops, a lot of like RPE 6, RPE 7
Yeah.
type stuff. And she hit a 7.1% increase on her block. Now, the question is that just because it's new? I don't know, right? But it's not a particular, let's here, emotionally, it's not a style I would gravitate towards programming. But looking at it, I'm like, okay. And other times when we've run more sub max style stuff, we've seen some pretty good rate of gain. I just haven't sat down and measured it because this was 2 years ago, the last time we did something like that. It was a long time and we didn't have as much data at that point. And you're like, okay, cool. And so like, well, the question becomes, if that's the input that gives us the highest stimulus, like how do we approach it strategically where we can assess periodically to make sure it's on track, to make sure that that's the right amount of stimulus to keep putting into the system.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you're just looking at, okay, well, like, what's my best single today? That's, especially with a lifter like this, like, that's not the stimulus that's going to move her forward. Right. It's like you get a lot of people in the center of that bell curve where they'll progress well because like the conventional hard training style works for them. And like it's a happy coincidence, but they're unaware of that.
Yeah.
of like their testing and the thing that progresses them are the same thing. But like that'll change at some point too, right?
Yeah, it's like when does that paradigm shift? When do you just like get to the point where you're either physically too strong that you can't reasonably recover from it, or where your body just maybe you have like your squat responds well to it for a very long time and then your deadlift does not, or vice versa, like your deadlift starts to kill a squat. Like when does that paradigm shift and when do you need that different approach?
As you've gotten, I mean, here, I think competition level is a poor proxy for this, but I
Yeah.
mean, naturally, as you've gone to higher level meets and pro meet like this with your first pro meet, right?
Yeah.
Oh, how often do you find yourself having to make more than fine tuning level adjustments to the strategy?
I think that the strategy that we so number one, like if we looked at my training from the past like 1 year, let's say, aside from the 3 blocks that like I couldn't squat or deadlift over 300 pounds because my back was fried, I think we maybe made 2 changes to those, right? And it was a matter of like it worked. We put in X, we got out Y. We put in X, we got out Y+1. And it just cyclically gave us consistent results. But like bench specifically, this is the first block in over 2 years where I've not had a single program. Like,
Who are you?
that's stupid. It should like, you look at, like, on paper, like, eventually the wheel falls off the wagon. Okay, yeah, we had, like, a close grip a couple, like, 18 months ago. We had, like, Larson press 22 months, but the overall distribution of, like, sets and reps and percentage-wise where things were at and, like, numbers-wise where things were at hasn't changed in, like, 12 months, and I added, like, 40 pounds to my bench, like.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can be frustrating sometimes to be like, "Oh, I've got a single at 6 again today." It's like, it's
Yeah.
worked, like,
What is six?
I don't even I as a lifter, I don't report RPE. I'm sure Sean doesn't like this about me and just has never told me this, because conflict is not, like, a big thing he's on. But if you were to look at my Excel sheet, I fill in all the numbers, I write notes, everything, but the RPE column is empty for the past 26 blocks, 27 blocks. I'm just like, I don't know. It's a 500 something pound squat. It feels heavy.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking too much about like how many reps do I have in reserve, or I'm like, it moved okay, or like it's week 2. Week 2 always feels like shit, and I'm okay with that. Like we added 5 pounds versus last block. It felt about as terrible as usual. Like we're probably making progress.
Yeah. This feels bad, just like every other week two squat. I think we're on track.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that I've said to other people in the gym before, like, "Oh, like, how are you feeling on, like, bench?" If they know it's a week 4, week 5, I'm doing, like, 200, 205 kilos. I'm like, "It feels terrible," but, like, it feels as terrible as it always does.
Precisely. It's so interesting. Like I have such a inverse response. Like I always know when my block is over,
Yeah.
but I respond so linearly up to that point. It's like I feel fine. I feel a little better. I feel a little better. I get like kind of trained. I feel like I'm lifting weights at like week 4. And then like week 5, I do week 5 workout. The volume's exactly the same as week 4. And I'm like, I can't move my fucking arms right now. Like I'm so sore from the same amount of work. And I'm like, yep, cool, block's over. Perfect.
I will say, like, typically, like, when we push pretty hard for the first 4 weeks, and then getting into week 5, we have a secondary deadlift at the front of the week. We usually pull that down, and that usually is enough to give my legs and my back and my hips a bit more on squat and deadlift for the week. But, like, my joints generally feel like glass at that point in time. But after
In
this
spite of
meet,
performance being pretty strong.
yeah, like, performance is high, but, like, fatigue is also clearly high. This was probably the physically best I've ever felt the week of a competition. Point blank. Even the day after, the week after, like, I could train normally. I didn't feel fried. I didn't feel, like, totally worn out, which was really interesting. And I don't know if it's because I missed my 3rd deadlift and, like, just, like, left it on the floor. There's a video somewhere of me, like, trying to pull it and then be like, "Ah, whatever," and just, like, literally walking away like that. I don't know if it's because, like, I didn't systemically get that extra fatigue from one pull, but, you know, when you look at, like, how I felt in the past and how things have changed, physically the best I've ever felt, which is weird.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Anything else you want to add? Just bringing it back to like competing at higher levels and contrasting the names, smaller meets before we wrap things up here.
One thing that, like, I've always found to be a positive thing at local level meets, I think definitely applies to higher level meets, is not keeping your headphones on the whole time. Take your headphones off, talk to some people, be friendly, say hi. I train at the same gym that like Gavin Aiden does. The first couple times I interacted with him, I expected him to be this like super locked in, like I'm going to war type of mindset, like because he's like the big like burn the ship. That's his thing. And talking to him in the gym, he's always been like a very chill, down to earth guy. Like, oh yeah, like I've got a 600, I got a 700, whatever today, and like it's gonna be heavy, but I'm okay. It's kind of the same at like the high level. I anticipated like maybe that's how those guys are in the gym, but when you get to the actual platform, because there's competition, maybe that's when they like really like start to show their teeth a little bit. And they weren't. They're all just like super chill dudes, just like room temperature level of intensity almost the entire time. And I found that like being friendly, saying hi was obviously always a good thing, but because I was, I think, too intense with some of my attempts, gassed myself out versus like we said earlier, like these guys kind of keep a very steady pulse the whole time and they're able to perform. Maybe they get intense towards the last deadlift because they just like need it at that point. But even the dudes who like I'm sure you if you're competing at a high level meet for the first time who they don't know you, but you know them. You might look up to them. Um, they're still just regular people. This is like a fun thing they do on the weekend. They're happy to be there. Just like say hi. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't put people on too much of a pedestal. Like respect the strength, but like don't.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, like,
people.
they're
We're
at the end
lifting
of
heavy
the day,
circles
like,
here.
they got their own stuff going on, they're just there to have fun.
Yeah. And on that topic of kind of taking competition seriously, one thing to note with like national level meets is typically by the time you're at that high level, people are taking the meet pretty serious. Like they've peaked hard for it. They're generally going to try to bring outside of some like strange extenuating circumstances. By the time you're at a high level meet, people are going to try to bring their A game with their program and with the meet day. Whereas like at a local meet, you might just be trying to like get a QT again or, show up to the minimum standard. You might be capable of a 700 kilo total, but you're like, well, I can hit, I need to hit 630 to hit a qualifying total to go do the next meet or something. And I just happen to not have it right now. I'm going to like roll in and hit 630 and then keep training for this next meet because it's only 7 weeks away or something.
Yep.
And like, that's something to be aware of. If you're like at the local level and trying to like search everyone's name on open powerlifting and see what they're capable of and guess what they could do and all. And like, good luck predicting that unless you're like surveying them and they'll give you straight answers. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
But at national level, generally, if you're going to go and do that, like cyber sleuth, you probably have a better feel at that point because it's like they're probably going to push for big numbers because it's a big meet
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
intent is more consistent at least. All right. Sweet. Anything else you want to add, or I feel like that's probably a good place to close things
Yeah.
out?
That's all I got.
All right. Thank you as always, man. Yeah. Have a great one.
You too.
Bye.
See ya.